It seems like no matter how big Ripple wins, some people just refuse to accept it. In this video, I want to break down a brand new interview by Charles Gasparino, where he was essentially going out and saying that Judge Torres got the ruling wrong and that a future court is ultimately going to reverse it. In this video, I want to show you where the facts actually lie and give you some concrete proof that disproves most of the things he is saying. Guys, this is a very important video and better understanding exactly how much clarity XRP actually has right now. A lot of people are completely missing this, but the SEC actually capitulated big time, and this should prove that tokens like XRP are never going to be declared a security. Like always, your support means so much to this channel. Thank you to everyone who takes the time to like these videos and subscribe to the channel. Your support really does help so much. Also, if you ever need a good place to buy some XRP, make sure to check out my favorite exchange Uphold down in the description of this video. With that said, though, let's jump right into it, and I hope you guys enjoy the content. Guys, the way we're going to do this is we're going to listen to this interview together, and then I'm going to interject when Charles Gasparino just gets something wrong. This is so important for you guys to understand because this is the kind of FUD we're going to continually see. And the more you guys understand the nuance of what a lot of these people are saying and where they are severely messing stuff up, the better you are going to be able to pick out who actually knows what they're talking about and who is just making stuff up on the spot or is completely uneducated on how most of this stuff works. Now, guys, I don't really have anything personally against Charles Gasparino, but I will say the one thing that really did rub me the wrong way severely was that when he made a bet on the air with John Deaton about who would win this case, I think they bet something so trivial like a steak dinner, he essentially refused to pay up. So I think this shows a lot about Charles Gasparino's character. He seems to have a really hard time admitting when he was wrong. Almost every single person who has followed this case has come away with the understanding that Ripple won pretty massively here. And if you were to have to pick a side on who won, 99% of people would say Ripple. Charles Gasparino is essentially refusing to pay up on this bet. I think he has some really hard time admitting when he's wrong. He seems to have some kind of complex around that. So I don't know if this is him just trying to save face on a lot of that. I don't know if he's in denial about the ruling, but he says a lot of things in this interview that I think are just straight up wrong. And I actually want to provide you guys facts on why he's wrong. This is actually going to educate you on a lot of different things that have happened since this case where the SEC has actually capitulated. And the whole reason they have been capitulating is because they understand they lost on massive issues in this case. The more you understand these key features, the more you are going to be able to diagnose FUD and understand when someone is simply making stuff up to try to push their agenda. Let's start this thing off and really break down where Charles Gasparino makes his first mistake, because this is going to show you very quickly that while there are people with a lot of clout, a lot of following, a lot of media praise, they really don't understand this stuff as well as they might seem to do. And in fact, many of you probably understand this stuff a lot better than people like Charles Gasparino. Let's listen up to this and then break it down.
Well, I mean, I think you got to kind of look at the cases. We should point out the one thing that I point out in the book, which is kind of interesting, confluence of things. Larry Fink was losing at BlackRock a lot of assets under management until he went non-woke. Part of his movement, non-woke, was to embrace crypto, just so you know. And that's, it's interesting. He went there and he knew, because it's like, if you're going to go non-woke, embracing crypto is one way to do it. And, whether he believes it or not, it doesn't matter. He went there.
Well, this doesn't really matter, but I have never associated non-woke or woke with crypto at all. It kind of just sounds like Charles Gasparino doesn't even really know what woke means. I don't think that was the case at all. I think BlackRock and Larry Fink just started to understand how important this technology was. But more importantly, they understood that if they were the first to start creating Bitcoin-related products and other crypto-related products, a lot of people were going to flow into that ecosystem and they were going to make a lot of money. So I don't think this has anything to do with being woke or non-woke. And in fact, BlackRock is huge into ESG, which is actually more on the woke side. Cryptocurrencies really are not on the scale when it comes to woke or non-woke. So this first part just seems off base and a lack of understanding of the topics at hand.
That's one thing. In terms of XRP and Ripple, I've done so much research into this case. The SEC people that were there that charged him would say they told him to stop doing these coin offerings and they wouldn't stop. So they had no choice to do it, to basically charge them with selling unregistered securities. The Ripple people say, well, we followed the same playbook as Ethereum. They literally, we did ICOs, they did an ICO, and you grandfathered them in. It's unfair.
So there is so much wrong with that. I don't even know where to start. Ripple did not follow Ethereum. Ethereum went after Ripple. XRP was around 5 to 6 years before Ethereum. XRP never had an ICO. He gets that wrong too. There was no initial coin offering with the XRP ledger. The XRP ledger was created and essentially tokens were gifted. There was no sale. Now, later down the road, once the network was fully built out, yes, there has been sales of XRP, but this is completely different from an ICO. And Jay Clayton, the person who filed the lawsuit against Ripple, the company, has actually acknowledged this. He said an ICO takes place. He said this when he was at the SEC. He said an ICO takes place when there is a sale of the token prior to the network being developed. That is exactly what Ethereum did and has nothing to do with what Ripple did with XRP. So he completely misconstrues this entire point. Not only does he think that Ethereum had their sale and then Ripple copied them, but Ripple and Ethereum did completely different ways of distributing the token. He thinks both Ripple and Ethereum did an ICO. It's completely untrue. Ripple created the network, had XRP tokens, and then distributed them throughout the network without doing a single sale. Ethereum, they essentially used the tokens to fundraise to build the network, which is the definition of an ICO. So right off the bat, you can see that Charles Gasparino is really getting his facts wrong. He has absolutely no idea on the creation of these tokens, the timelines, the difference between just selling a token and selling a token that doesn't exist yet. He is completely all over the place on the foundation of some of the most important principles of this case. And I think that is just so important to understand because he starts off the comments by saying he has done so much research, but doesn't even understand the basics of the foundation of what makes a lot of these offerings different from one another.
One thing I will say, so that's both sides of the story. If I had my druthers as a regulator, I would just leave them alone and start from scratch, create a safe harbor. That being said, there is a ruling out there that Judge Torres put out there. And I think the ruling is weak for crypto. I think it's a dumb ruling because when you really pick it apart, what she's saying is, and this cannot be allowed to stand, and that's the problem that this ruling has. She said that institutional investors, people who have bought Ripple institutionally, there's a higher bar of disclosure for them than you do for retail people who would buy it in the secondary market.
First of all, look at Paul Barrett. He's like, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. And first of all, that is not at all what Judge Torres said. You can see his brain literally loading as he's spitting that out. He totally misconstrues what Judge Torres said. Judge Torres did not say there's a higher bar for selling to institutions than to retail. She was simply analyzing the difference of sales that took place. It just so happened that some of the things Ripple was doing when they were selling to institutions created a securities offering. But if they did those same exact things when selling to retail, guess what? That would have been a securities offering too. It had nothing to do with who Ripple was selling to. It just so happened that they sold to institutions and retail in different ways. When they were selling to institutions, they were doing things like lockups. They were doing things like discounts. These are the kinds of things that made those offering securities. When they sold to retail, they just sold the token at market price, and that's why there was no investment contract there. The whole investment contract thing was because Ripple had stipulations on the tokens they were giving to institutions. They didn't have any of that for retail. And because of that, there was no securities offering. Charles Gasparino is trying to make it sound like the offerings were exactly the same. The only difference was one was to institutions and one was to retail. That could not be more wrong, and Ripple actually sold to institutions in many cases, and those sales weren't securities. So it goes to show that once again, he is completely wrong here. It has nothing to do with who is getting the tokens. It has to do with how Ripple offered the tokens, the sale, the contract in the middle. And just to clear this up for anyone who's confused, I can sell you whiskey. And if I just sell you whiskey, just hand it over, you give me cash, that's not a securities offering. But if I make some kind of promise over the course of that sale, then that could be considered a securities offering. So it's all how you offer and sell something. Judge Torres went out of her way to say the token itself was not a security. So as long as Ripple sells the token in a way that does not constitute any kind of promises, that's not a securities offering. Charles Gasparino massively construes this. He gets the entire thing wrong. He's under the understanding or under the assumption that it just has to do with who you're selling to. Once again, he is completely off base here. He is missing the most important part of the ruling. And what we have actually seen is the SEC has acknowledged this. And this is the biggest slap in the face to everything he is saying. The SEC is now pulling back charges of calling tokens securities in other cases. In the Binance case, they took down 13 tokens that they called securities because they knew those charges would never stand. What we are seeing is the SEC is acknowledging they got massive things wrong in the Ripple case, and the token itself can never be the security. What we are seeing from Charles Gasparino is he is simply not paying attention to any of this. He's ignoring this. He is under the assumption that the token is the security and it depends on who you offer it to. When the reality of the situation is, and the SEC is already acknowledging this, that the token is never the security, and as long as you offer the token in a way that does not create any promises of profits in the future, it is very likely, it doesn't matter who you sell to, it is not a securities transaction. Guys, I'm going to stop it here because he honestly just rambles on about a lot of the stuff we already covered in this interview. But I hope this really shows you that there is a lot of people who have big followings who act like they really understand this stuff, who get the most basic things wrong about this case. I could have went into a lot more detail on a lot of things he said, but to be honest, it's pointless because he is so off base on the fundamentals. He is so off base on the critical aspects of this case in general, it is impossible to take anything else he says seriously. I hope this really helps you understand that XRP going forward is not a security. And it doesn't matter how many uneducated people go on different networks and say the contrary, the SEC is essentially already capitulated by amending their other cases to take back the charges against the specific tokens being securities. XRP is never going to be a security going forward, no matter how many of these people get it wrong. I hope this video really helped clear things up. And guys, my goal is just to make it so when you guys see things like this, you understand it's FUD and you understand the exact issues with what people like this are saying. Guys, thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed this update. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. It really does mean so much. And for now, Mickle out.